It's 6 p.m. I'd like to welcome you all to the meeting of the Lower Thames Crossing Task Force on Monday, the 17th of July 2023. Please be aware that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed, and the recording will be made available on the Council's website. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Democratic Services, do we have any apologies for absence? Councillor Salmons, thank you. Any other apologies for absence? None, thank you. Item 2, the minutes. To approve as a correct record the minutes of the Lower Thames Crossing meeting held on the 19th of June 2023. I move that the meetings be approved as a correct record. Are there any comments on the accuracy of the minutes? Laura Brake from the Thames Crossing Action Group.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to clarify for everyone that I did actually send a slight amendment to the minutes through to Democratic Services, who they've kindly adjusted that. So in keeping with that, yeah, I'm quite happy with that. Thank you.
And Robert Quick, Resident Rep.
Just a note that I didn't receive a copy of the minutes for last meeting.
Could those minutes be circulated again, please, Democratic Services? Do I have someone to second the accuracy and correctness of the minutes? Councillor Muldowney, thank you. Excellent. Moving on, items of urgent business. I have not agreed to any items of urgent business this evening. Item 4, declarations of interest. Does anyone wish to declare a declaration of interest? That's no one, thank you. Item 5, a verbal update on the development consent order, DCO, pre-examination process and next steps for this. I'm going to hand over to Lee Nicholson and Chris Stratford. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. So in terms of updates since the last meeting, I can confirm that the planning performance agreement between Thurrock and National Highways has been agreed to be signed by the Council's Cabinet. This is a positive step for the authority, meaning the Council can recover the vast majority of costs associated with the DCO process. At the last meeting, members would have heard from Mark and Chris, concerning the preliminary meeting and the examination timetable, which has been set by the examining authority, or the EXA. Since that last meeting, the EXA have issued the Rule 8 letter, which sets out the confirmed timetable. I think there was a discussion about that at the last meeting. So the next milestone in that timetable is the submission of the Council's Local Impact Report, which is due to be made tomorrow. The Local Impact Report, or LIR, is a detailed assessment of the impacts that would be felt by a borough as a result of a DCO proposal. As members will probably expect, the LIR in this case is very detailed, running to some 240 pages, including appendices. This sets out the areas of challenge and objection. The LIR will shortly appear on the Planning Inspectorate website, along with all other relevant documents that are held there. Once this deadline has passed, the next phase of the timetable will focus upon issue-specific hearings and then a series of written questions. Chair, I'm in your hands at this moment, so I can either provide an overview of the contents of the LIR or can hand over to Chris to provide you with an update on the next procedural steps for the examination timetable. So, whichever you prefer.
Thank you. My first question was going to be, could we have some examples of the things of the 240 issues? So perhaps if you could go into that, please.
Certainly. So there's several key areas that's within the impact report. First off is actually challenging the need for the project. So the Council contests the need for Lower Thames Crossing. The scheme does not relieve the congestion at Dartford Crossing, and the traffic levels are modelled to return to existing levels within 5 years of opening of LTC. The second is around the scheme objectives and what LTC is looking to achieve. The Council believes there's a number of valid concerns around the LTC scheme, believes that particularly under transport, economic, community, environmental areas are not met by the current scheme. Council feels that the scheme does not provide significant relief to the crossing, is not compatible with the UK's or National Highways net zero ambitions and legal targets, and there's also concerns around the safety impacts of the scheme. The Council also considers the value for money for the scheme to be overstated due to cost pressures. Following on from that, the estimated margin of benefit of LTC is now so low that even with quite modest changes in the assumptions would wipe out the net benefit entirely, which basically means that the scheme would cost more than the benefits it could produce and wouldn't be justified in terms of value for money. The Council is also challenging LTC's lack of consideration of alternatives to the proposal, which I think has been rehearsed at this meeting previously. In terms of transport modelling issues, the transport model to support LTC is considered not fit for purpose and inadequate, as you would expect, the LIR expands upon this particular theme in some detail. Access to development sites is another key planning issue, because the design of the LTC route provides limited access to the development sites and or through the local plan development sites, and also access to national port facilities in the borough. Numerous environmental and health impacts which are contained within the LIR. Essentially, the Council concludes that LTC will have a significant impact on the environment and health of people in the borough, and there would be a number of changes that would need to be made to the application for it to be more acceptable to the Council. Staying on the environment theme, in terms of flooding, there's a question around the wider sustainability benefits to the community that would need to be presented by the scheme to outweigh the flood risk impacts. There's also concerns around emergency services provision. There's been a lot of work with emergency services and safety partners, which hasn't been addressed in the application. So concern around utilities, so there's a lack of a cohesive review around proposed utility works, and that causes confusion and difficulty in the Council's ability to review proposals and impacts, and this has been raised through that process. There's also concerns around the legacy of the scheme, which again is a big sizable topic in the LIR, as is skills, education, employment. Under that heading, there's particular concern that the combination of unambitious and insufficient localised targets means that the opportunity for National Highways to deliver positive education employment for the borough is not going to be met or seized. Greenbelt is obviously another key planning issue, and through the process it hasn't provided the Council with, or National Highways, sorry, as applicant, haven't provided the Council with a robust Greenbelt assessment for the alternatives or preferred routes. It's unclear how the Greenbelt impacts have been assessed correctly in the process. Chair, there's some more minor issues, but those are the main big ticket headings, so hopefully that's of help.
Thank you very much. Most of those ring lots of bells that have been through this task force in the past. It's good to see them being officially on the list. Chris, are you next to present?
Yeah, I'll add a couple. The first point that Lee referred to about the need for the project, it's not that we're objecting in principle to the need for a crossing. It's that the need for this crossing as designed is not properly demonstrated, and the 7 scheme objectives that have been around for some years now, we do not believe that they satisfy those adequately, hence the conclusion. There is also a range of issues that we've raised about the Council's land ownership that's affected, and particularly about compensation, or rather the lack of compensation to residents that are seriously affected. And particularly, we have a big section in it that deals with what are called control documents. I think I've explained them before. These are documents that must legally be complied with as part of the DCO application. And they have, I think, 14 of them in total, including the DCO order itself. And we have made many suggestions for changes and improvements to those, which aren't properly covered. But other than that, Lee's summary was concise and accurate. There are 240 pages, but that's, and on top of that is there are 13 appendices, of which there are many hundreds of pages. And the only way we can submit this is through a file share system tomorrow, because it can't be emailed because they're too big. So we are in the final stages of sorting it all out. In terms of, Lee mentioned the remaining broad categories of deadlines coming up, and they do come thick and fast. What's called deadline 1 is tomorrow. Deadline 2 is on the 3rd of August, 2 weeks' time. Deadline 3 is on the 24th of August. And at each deadline, you can only make submissions and written submissions at those deadlines. You can't do it in between. And the Rule 8 letter that Lee refers to specifies what they might accept to be submitted at each deadline. The key one in between deadline 2 and deadline 3 on the 15th of August is that the examining authority will issue their first set of written questions. Now, we don't know how many they're likely to be. In other large DCOs, there were, for Tideway, there were 609 questions in three separate goes at it. For Sizewell, there was over 1,000 questions. So we don't know. This is the first set coming in what would be about a month. Now, the majority of the questions are likely to come to the applicant, but some will go to local authorities or specific local authorities, and they will require answering fairly quickly. I'm not sure. Oh yes, here we are. The deadline for answering them is a month later. So no matter how many you get, the deadline for answering those questions in writing is the 19th of September. So that's a month. And in between all of that, there will be a host of open floor and issue specific hearings where the council, in most cases, I would imagine, will be represented by specialists and will be required to answer questions and then follow it up with written versions of those questions and the answers. So I've only really concentrated on the next couple of months, but it doesn't change much after that. It is a very tight system, and the deadlines are hard and fast. So I'll leave you to digest that.
Thank you, Chris. And overall, the process is due to finish on December the 28th. Is that correct?
December the 20th. Just before Christmas. 28th would be a bit tricky. Yeah, 20th.
Thank you. December the 20th, just to confirm that. Open up to the floor to comments or questions from members. Councillor Spate.
It's probably to Lee more than anything else. Given the somewhat daunting possibility in terms of the local authority having to answer specific questions of which we don't know how many there are, but we do know there is a finite deadline from receipt to handing those back. And given the parlous state of Thurrock Council and the administrative procedures that we see on a daily basis now being snarled up, is the authority confident that it has the capacity to deal with these matters in a timely fashion? Because if it isn't, we presumably need to take some remedial action, and we would need to do it now rather than at the event, because we'll just run out of time.
Lee, would you like to come in there?
Thank you, Chair. I think that's a very good question. in terms of the support that the council has, there is a fairly significant consultant team that works alongside the authority, and Chris obviously being a member of that team. The reference to the PPA I think is really important as well, because that provides the mechanism to make sure that the funding is recovered from National Highways to cover those costs of that consultant team. So I think if there wasn't the PPA in place and the council didn't have that external team, then there probably would be cause for concern. But having the benefit of both of those, I think that should give the assurance to the authority and to residents that the council is able to respond appropriately.
Yeah, I mean, that's good to hear. I mean, it's an imponderable, and I'm only talking about things now that may or may not happen. And Chris might, I mean, have an idea. It would seem to me quite likely that if we are questioned as an authority, things will be incredibly complex. And it's great to hear that we've got access to the specialists who should be able to provide those answers. But I do think, and your answer was perfectly acceptable and very valid, but I'll just reiterate that I would be extremely embarrassed were we to come to a point before that September deadline when the message coming back to this committee was, unfortunately, we as an authority were unable to get an answer back in time. And then, were that to happen, I would be referring back to this meeting, as I'm sure would be others. But just to give it that sort of gravitas, there really needs to be the thought now to make sure that every single bit of... And I'll leave it there.
Just off the back of that, Lee or Chris, the PPA, does it run for the entire dates of the process?
Yes, it does. However, the majority of the work is covered by the PPA, and that is different to some of the other local authorities, and that's largely because of the 114 position that Thurrock Council finds itself in, and the negotiations that Mark and I and others have done with National Highways. So all of the work currently on the LIR, and indeed on the Statement of Common Ground going forward, which needs to be updated regularly, is all covered. However, there are certain things that National Highways refuse to cover. Responding to written questions is one of them. Paying for our King's Council is another one. And attendance at hearings is another one. However, my understanding, Lee, is that the business plan that has been approved takes account of that, and the council is prepared to cover those costs which have been itemised.
Thank you, Chris. I think Mr. Mark Bradbury touched on that at the last meeting as well, things such as King's Council, so that's reassuring. Yep. Laura Blake of the Thames Crossing Action Group.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to publicly thank Chris and the entire team for all the work that they're doing. Going through it just on the level of doing it for Thames Crossing Action Group, I appreciate all the deadlines, how it all works and how much is involved. So I just want to publicly thank the entire team for the time and effort they're putting into it. Thank you.
I think all the members would echo those thoughts. Thank you, Laura. Thank you to the team. Any other member of any comment or question at this point? Councillor Muldowney.
Thank you, Chair. Have we got any sense of how it's going? Is it going in our favour, or is it difficult to tell at this point?
Well, it's difficult to tell, certainly. The request that we made, well, the several requests, all of the same nature that we made for during the pre-examination period, before the formalities actually started, where we requested a delay of 7 weeks. And we made that request on a number of occasions and verbally at various meetings. That was denied. So I don't know whether you want to read anything into that other than the fact that they are pretty adamant as an authority that we're going to stick to the 6-month programme for the examination. But there's no, I mean, the two issue-specific hearings that have been held so far have been different in the sense that they've been less interrogatory and more an opportunity for all parties to give their views. Normally, they would be the examining authority asking questions of the applicant and that going backwards and forwards. But there was some of that, certainly, and they clearly read their brief very well. But most of those hearings was all about everyone having their say about a particular issue, which made it quite fulsome. So I honestly, Councillor, I'm not really sure, and that's the nature of the independent process. You should not know, and you will not know even at the end of the examination and during the recommendation report that's being prepared by the examining authority. That goes to government confidentially. So at the end of the examination, you then wait for a period of 6 months before any decision is issued, and that's then issued by government. So the independence and confidentiality is maintained throughout. Sorry.
Thank you, Chris.
Laura Blake.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll just add to that. As Chris said, obviously, you can't tell one way or the other, but having attended quite a lot of the meetings, I would just like to share with those that maybe haven't had the time and opportunity to watch them, that the inspectorate have been asking some fantastic questions and actually pushing National Highways to provide a certain level of information on aspects that we and others have been asking for a number of years. So it is good to see that actually happening during the process now.
Thanks, Laura. That's a good insight.
Just to second some of the comments there from Laura, I also watched some of the proceedings, and yeah, very impressed at how they asked the right questions, and it is questions that we've been asking in this chamber, and they are going to want answers before they take it further in the process. It's good to see the planning inspectorate being so robust. Any other comment or question from members? Robert Quick, the resident rep.
Thank you, Chair. I've noticed in the process so far there have been quite a number of site visits by members of the DCO panel. Have we had any feedback on that? Do we know whether it's shaping their thinking?
Would you like me to answer that, Chairman?
Yes, please, Chris.
Yeah, on the PINS website, there's a document called the Examination Library, which is updated every week or two, and in it there are every single document that has been submitted to the examining authority, including all future documents, will be in there in various updates. And I can give Jenny or Elaine a link to that, and within it there are each of these documents, every single one of them, and there must be 700 or 800 of them now, has a reference number. So for instance, the application documents are APP-111 or whatever the number is. Subsequent submissions are AS- and a number. And the 5 unaccompanied site inspections that the examining authority have undertaken are called SI 001, 2, 3 and 4 and 5. And the latest one was done on the 6th and 7th of July, but mainly that was all in the Dartford Gravesham area. Now, at the procedural deadline C, we made a list in our submission. We made a list of 12 additional sites and areas that should be included in what will be arranged, which is the accompanied site visit. We're reiterating that request in the procedural deadline D, which also has a deadline of tomorrow. So it is one of the other submissions going in tomorrow. So they've certainly spent, in the 5 visits now, probably something in the region of 8 to 10 days looking at various parts of the entire route and the sort of adjacent areas. So I would hope that they have a fairly good understanding of the area now. And then there will be an accompanied site visit, and we will request tomorrow to be part of that, have representatives. And of course, what you cannot do on those accompanied site visits is any lobbying whatsoever. It is factual descriptions and pointing out various things if asked. It is nothing else. So I'd hope, Robert, that they are shaping their views by understanding the local area as well as they can. I will send a link to the library, and if you scroll through the many pages of this library document, you'll get to the ones, and there are web links that take you straight to the document, and you can read each of the unaccompanied site visit reports is accompanied by a map and about 10 or 12 pages describing what they've seen. Now, as I said, number 5 is not worth Thurrock looking at because it's mainly south of the river, but some of the others are worth looking at if you're interested.
Any other member comment or question for Chris or Lee? Just one thing. We have spoke about this before at Task Force about the employment relating around Lower Thames crossing, and I noticed we brought that up earlier when we were talking in the local impact reports about the lack of a guarantee for local jobs, for want of a better word. National highways, what do they class as a employment local to the scheme, just to remind people that are viewing?
Yeah, very good question. They have taken local to be people within, I think it's 20 miles of the scheme. In the LIR, and I'm just looking it up now, if you can just give me a minute. We have, well, not only in the LIR, but also in the previous discussions over the last 2 years, we have questioned National Highways' definition of local, for the simple reason that if you take the wide version of local that they call local, what that means is that very few of the benefits flow to Thurrock. And given the fact that we have 70% of the route, we believe that more benefits ought to flow to Thurrock. We have suggested that the definition of local is restricted to the 3 local authorities that are directly affected, which is Gravesham, ourselves, and Havering. There is a small effect in Brentwood, but not much. It's a small part of the connections on the M25, and my understanding is that there's almost nothing in Medway and almost nothing in Dartford either. So we've suggested that locals focused on that, and that the employment is derived from those 3 proportionate to the impact. That has never been accepted. We have a disagreement, and we have set that out in our LIR, and if you actually work out that 20% of the workforce should come from postcodes within the local authorities affected, which is quite a lot of local authorities, that means that Thurrock gets 4% of the labour, 4, which is far short of what it should be. So we have tackled that, and when you get to look at the LIR, probably towards the end of the report, end of the week, I would think it will take them a while, because there will be lots of submissions being made tomorrow, and and ours is something in the region of 200 megabytes, and so it will take a while to upload it all. And we're one of many people that will be submitting things. So towards the end of the week, it will be there. Once it's there, I can let Elaine and Jenny know, and you can go in and have a look at it.
Thank you. Yeah, if it
Is
could
that-
be circulated once it's ready, that'd be fantastic. Just
Yeah,
to
it
touch on,
is. It is about in Word. It's about 7 megabytes, and therefore once it's PDF'd, it will be down to about 5 or less. So it is emailable. So I can do that and give you a link as well.
perfect, thank you. That figure of 4% is very worrying, so low for a
It
borough
is.
that gets so much of its greenbelt and local plan are affected by this project to only return an estimate of 4% employment.
The actual statement, let me read the statement, I found it now, within the Skills, Education and Employment Strategy, which is dated October of last year. It says, we want at least 45% of our workforce to be recruited from within 20 miles of the project. This consists of 20%. I don't know whether that's 20% of 45 or about half of 45, it's not clear. From postcodes that sit within the local authorities that the Lower Thames Crossing impacts directly, plus 25% that are within the 20-mile radius. So in other words, 20% come from within the 8 authorities that they think are impacted, and 25% comes from beyond that up to 20 miles away. And the net result of all of that is that we get 4% in our view, which is far from adequate.
I don't like the figure, but thank you for your information, Chris.
Okay.
Going to go to Councillor Spate and then to Laura Blake.
Yeah, it's just on that subject, and obviously I wasn't part of previous debates, and it's done and dusted now. I have to sort of almost put a foot in the other camp, as it were, and say that knowing my reasonable knowledge of the employment base that is here in Thurrock, and the relatively low level of employment, and certainly knowing, having spoken to some fairly senior major employers, you know, I mean, I think we might be guilty of setting a target that we couldn't then fulfil, which would diminish our credibility. I mean, this is a fairly specialist workload, building the things that they're going to build. It's not something that you can just roll up and learn on the day. So, I mean, I don't know what thought went into it, but I do think it is lovely to and very prosaic to say, yeah, we should have this and we should have that and whatever. I'm not sure that it would be great to win an argument and them saying, well, okay, we'll ensure that we have 10% of the people who are working on the project will come from Thurrock, and then we can't find those people in Thurrock. We'd be made to look a little bit silly. I sometimes think, yes, it's great, and in a perfect world it would happen, but we do live in the real world. And by means of compensation to the borough, there may be other things that we could get in terms of what effectively are anyway short-term jobs. I mean, it's all done and dusted now, but I'm not sure that would have been a road that I would have gone down unchallenged in terms of making that a hugely significant part of what we were asking for. But as I say, it's there now. It promises to be interesting if they do give us some more.
Could I respond to you, Councillor?
Yes, Chris, that's fine.
Thank you. You're absolutely right. Certainly on other projects I've worked on, when an applicant determines a fairly ambitious target for local employment, it has proved quite difficult to achieve that. So you're right that you need to be a little bit wary of targets that are unachievable, but it is their target as it currently stands. They have to report on it on an annual basis to see how they've achieved. But the other factor is that we have asked for a number of some funding basically for a number of council officers to be created to assist the it's the employment and business team that Terry Reagan runs, along with Steve Taylor, and we've asked for a number of posts, and that has been declined by National Highways. Instead, they have decided to form their own business team, and they have allocated one post for the north of the Thames and one post for the south of the Thames. So in other words, and we've also asked for funding to support our own business team in developing, the ability for local people to apply for some of these jobs that will be available. And that's been declined as well. So not only have they chosen a low target, we're not getting any help to try and help our residents get a position that they might otherwise want. So we're attacking this on a number of fronts, and you'll find it all in the report.
Thank you. That's really informative. And if, as I suspect, at some time in a number of years, we're having an inquest into what went wrong and what could have done and whatever, I think that may well be very, very relevant when we're looking at, because it certainly doesn't, the last part we just told me certainly does sound very unfair on Thurrock and adds to that huge pile of things that have been very unfair on Thurrock. But
indeed it does. Indeed. Yeah, exactly.
Thank you. Thank you.
Laura Blake.
Thank you, Chair. I actually originally put my hand up just to mention to Robert Quick, the residents rep, that in regards to the unaccompanied site visits, our open floor hearing 3 that happened in Dartford on the 5th of July, a resident actually picked up on a number of issues in the local community that he was representing, and the inspector actually said that they would consider going and doing a site visit of the area that he was referring to. And I'm happy to report that in the most recent one, they actually did that. So within a couple of days of someone bringing it up, they've actually gone out and actually done that site visit. So just to give people hope that they are listening and they are actually going out and learning as much as they can about the area. And then just following on from what's happened since I was going to bring that up, I think there is a lot of intentions and hopes that National Highways are presenting, not only in the application, thank you, Chris, but also on social media. And I think a lot of that is propaganda. Most recently, we raised the issue of the use of hydrogen that National Highways are now saying that they are looking and hoping to bring into the LTC to reduce the carbon emissions. And when we actually sent out our press release and industry publications such as New Civil Engineer picked up on it and Highways magazine, they actually, National Highways, came back with the feedback that the increased cost that we associated with the greener construction and the carbon emissions had been factored into the DCO application. Now, that is slightly questionable, because if they're saying that it reduces the carbon and it's been factored into the DCO application sits the carbon emissions at 6.6 million tonnes. So if that's already factored in, this latest news is certainly not reflective of any reduction, because if they've factored it in, that's what they've declared in the application. And similarly on the costs, because it all relates to them saying and connecting this to being a Pathfinder project, which is a strange title that has been given, that it's meant to be leading the way and setting the way for reducing carbon and being the greenest road ever built in the UK. And that title was given after a lot of the other information has come out, and certainly after the cost, because you have to remember that the bracket on the cost currently that goes up to £9 billion was actually as of August 2020. The Pathfinder title came in after that. So it is very questionable, and we have submitted a number of further questions to National Highways to try and dig deeper on that, because it certainly isn't sitting right.
Does that help, Robert? Thank you, Laura. Any other member question or comments on this item? Councillor Spate.
Sorry, I was just on the back of what Laura just said, and I was a very avid reader of the release about the hydrogen thing the other day. I'm wearing my other hat ran that particular story. And then it was just interesting at the end, you talked about their PR operation and the way they pump things out and what they do. If I was to be critical of TBC in terms of its profile on a national scale, Laura and her team have done a magnificent job, and I could not praise them highly enough. I think they've been absolutely superb in terms of fighting the good fight. I would hope that as we move into this stage now where there is going to be a lot of rhetoric and there is going to be probably increased publicity, that TBC's, Thurrock Council's comms team and their senior executives within that team are very much aware that the council's stated position is that we are in opposition to this scheme and we should be doing exactly what National Highways team, PR team are doing and promoting our cause and issuing releases and getting high profile people to speak from within the council and making sure that there are releases. Because to be quite frank, I can't remember the last time I saw a Thurrock Council press release about the Lower Thames crossing. So I think that's a really good point that you made there, that they're ramping up their game, they're making claim after claim after claim, and as in any sphere, you know, mud will always stick. You put any amount of information out there, some of it will stick. Now, I know they're probably talking about informing very informed people anyway, but it all does count. So I would just, as a message from me, and hopefully from the other members of the group, is that TBC needs to get on the front foot as an executive body and be supporting the great work that the individual members of Laura's team are doing, and indeed the work that this group is doing, and to be fair, Chris's phenomenal work and the work that Lee are doing. I mean, I think there are a huge number of people pedalling very, very hard under the water, but the Thurrock duck doesn't seem to be moving very fast in public sight, and that, you know, we employ a team of people to do that, so let's use them.
Thank you, Councillor Spate. Interestingly, it brings me back to a motion that I raised at full council not too long ago. So perhaps in the work programme we can maybe look to ask the communications team to come to a future task force meeting, based on the back of your of that. Just before we move on, Lee or Chris, is there anything you'd like to add?
Not for me, no.
No, that's fine. Laura, I know you did a really good post on this. Just for people that might be watching this evening, could you just remind the public of what the deadline tomorrow is and what is actually at stake? What if you don't get it done by that time?
Yep, there are actually, as Chris said, there are two deadlines tomorrow. The first being procedural deadline D. So anybody that wishes to speak, you get as an individual, you'll get 5 minutes to talk directly at an open floor hearing in front of the examiners and let them know your issues and concerns. If you wish to speak at an open floor hearing moving forward, whether it be in person or virtually online, you need to register by tomorrow. If you are an affected person, so your property or land is directly impacted by the proposed route, then you need to register tomorrow to be heard at a compulsory acquisition hearing. That's deadline D. And also by deadline D is if you wish to request to attend the accompanied site inspections that Chris was mentioning earlier. That's by deadline D. And then on top of that, by deadline 1, again, tomorrow, everything's tomorrow, if you wish to submit a written submission, so it's sort of the written equivalent of an open floor hearing where you can share your issues and concerns with the planning inspectorate, then the deadline for that is tomorrow. And if you have watched any of the previous events or read any of the additional submissions, then you can also make comments in writing on those. You can go to our website, tcag.info, and you will actually see that there's an index on there for updates, and that will have one on the 18th of July deadlines that includes all the details and all the links you'd need if you do wish to take part. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Super informative as always. Yes, so just something I personally nearly missed. Those are different. When you go onto that one, for the one that finishes 23:59 on the 18th of July, they're different things. The one to be heard in person is different from the written submission. So there's lots of various forms you've got to fill out, and there's lots of different parts of the actual deadline. Councillor Spate?
Yeah, thank you. Well, Sorry, yeah. What time does that finish? You said tomorrow. Is it 5 o'clock tomorrow?
11:59.
11:59. What, in the evening?
Yes.
So we got all day tomorrow, right? Could I make a request, Chair, that the admin support team pass? It's going to take a while to draw the minutes of the meeting up, and I go back to the previous comment that I just made about our comms team. Our comms team have access to a Facebook thread with many thousands of followers. They've got a Twitter thread with followers, and they've got a website. So could I ask, I think it's not unreasonable to ask that tomorrow morning somebody from within the Thurrock Council operation just adds all the messages that Laura just mentioned, and you know, to get them out there. Because even if it only produced one more person who actually then went and had something to say, and that one thing that person said may turn out to be positive, it will be a positive thing. Because although if we don't flag it up, I suspect that it will pass by tomorrow, then the good ship Thurrock Council will have gone and it'll all be over. Sorry for being cynical about comms.
I think it's a really good suggestion, Councillor Spate, and I'd support it. So if officers can take that back, and if it's not already scheduled for something tomorrow on that day, hopefully we can get something out on the social media and communications channels. With that, any other member? Oh, Laura Blake.
Sorry, Chair, can I just jump in there as well? Probably an important point that I should have mentioned when covering the deadlines. You do have to be registered as an interested party to take part in any of the DCO process. So whilst it will be great to get some comms out there just to remind people, because there were a lot of people that did register as interested parties, you do have to be registered and you do have to include your unique reference number when you are making your submission or your request. For those that might not be sure where that is, when you registered, you would have had an email to confirm your unique reference number. If you have any difficulties, the PINS website has a phone number and an email address. Just get onto it as quickly as possible if you're struggling to find your unique reference number and ask them for assistance to see if they can help. Thank you.
Just to add to that from experience, if you search your emails for Planning Inspectorate, it will bring up the previous emails, and then that unique identifier is usually in those emails in a lot of the correspondence that they send to you. Any other member of comment, question or suggestion, it turns out, for members of the public? Looking around the room, can't see anything. Okay, thank you. Moving on to the last item, the work programme. Does any member wish to add anything to the work programme for the Lower Thames Crossing Task Force? The only thing that struck me, that it was something mentioned earlier, emergency services. These are obviously ambulances, fire engines, police cars that are usually supporting the Borough of Thurrock and its residents and businesses. So I think it'd be interesting to see a future item at this task force, how that's going to impact our residents and businesses by having an extra strain of effectively a large road running right through the middle, and when there is an emergency, you know, what are highways, national highways, going to do to actually make sure that we're not put at a detriment of our service to our residents and businesses? And these are life or death situations sometimes. So I'd like to put that out there, that we could bring that back to the task force in the future. Welcome any thoughts or comments, Councillor Raper?
I think that's really important, that we need to make sure it's discussed and recorded that we've got an interest in that. Thank you.
If I could comment on that, Chair.
Go ahead, Chris.
As part of the LIR, there is a couple of pages summarising the key issues with emergency services, because the Emergency Services and Safety Partners Steering Group, which was formed a little over 2 years ago, because the one that National Highways ran wasn't doing the job. So it was coordinated and formed. That the council is a member of, and I'm there as a representative. And Cheryl Wells and some of her team also attend, one of the Thurrock officers. The group, the steering group, is making its own written rep tomorrow, which we've commented on, and there is a joint statement of common ground between National Highways and the steering group also being submitted by National Highways tomorrow. There are many outstanding issues because as part of the steering group's response to the community impact consultation in September of 21, it made quite a large representation containing 56 recommendations. Now, many of those, most of those, in fact, are still outstanding to be resolved. So we are part of that group and hopefully influential on its content. Obviously, I don't get involved in emergency services stuff because I'm not qualified, but Cheryl does, as do fire, police and ambulance and various national health bodies and other local authorities are all part of it. So it's a big group. There's a monthly meeting and there's 40 or 50 people there, and for the first part, National Highways give an update. So we are on the case, and I probably could give you a verbal update of where we are. I'm nervous about writing anything in form of a written task force paper for the simple reason that the deadlines that we're about to embark upon don't allow me an awful lot of spare time, but I'm happy to come and talk about it as an item later.
I appreciate it's a busy time, because if we can maybe discuss that offline and how we're going to bring that back in some form,
Sure,
whether it's
absolutely.
verbal or a more formal written report. I
Indeed.
think it's something that the task force, there was lots of nods around the room, so something the task force would like to come here.
Yep.
Any other member with anything for the work programme? No. Okay, thank you everyone, and with that, it's 18:51. I conclude the business of the meeting and draw the meeting to a close. Thank you very much everyone, thank you.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.